Ensuring quality education for all has become sorely necessary for developing countries. Thousands of children are still out of school. This situation is due to various factors, including culture, demography, and poverty.
These ones, we must have them all included because the guiding factor is access to equitable education for all. And this education have got to be of quality. Education is the lead. We cannot achieve any sustainable development goal if we do not succeed with education. The second aspect of the crisis is that many millions are accessing school but actually are not learning any basic skills that will enable them to live with dignity and to enable Africa contribute usefully to the rest of the world as an equal partner.
Education is really in a form of crisis in our country because we are talking of quality, inclusion, and girls' education. Even infrastructure. Infrastructure was devastated during the war, and this one caused a cluster of children in one classroom. Sometimes we have 150 children in one classroom, 80 children in one classroom, just to one teacher, which the ratio is supposed to be 40:1. But we are talking of 150:1. The idea of free education in Africa, especially in Sierra Leone, is a cliche because everybody will say free. But the other things associated to the free is really not free because they have to pay extra charges, they ask them to carry decks to school, they ask them to pay for little things. So these extra charges, when you put them together, they are more than what the real school fees would be if they ask them to pay.
Governments remain the major funders of their respective education systems. However, the budgets allocated fail to provide schooling for all children. This funding gap explains the importance of the Global Partnership for Education. Public schooling appears as the solution that provides access to education to these social strata. But here again, challenges exist.
When we talk about quality and inclusive education in Africa, we think about financing education and quality education. In financing education, quality and inclusive education in Africa requires a lot of efforts from governments first, and then support from international aid. But we cannot base our education system on international financing. We need to promote what we call domestic funding, domestic financing of education. And this is possible.
Our government has been trying very hard to contribute to education development, and we've been fighting to ensure that we reach the mark goal of 20% budgetary allocation, which is tantamount to between 4 and 6% of GDP. But honestly, to date, we've not been able to hit that mark because the government has been sporous in the sense that we have been exposed to a lot of economic financial difficulties. But on the whole, the existing government that we have now has contributed a lot to education more than all other governments. The only fact is that we've not been able to reach the 20% budgetary allocation.
Foreign aid to education is crucial. However, some stakeholders fear that it might be inadequate in the long term. Governments are thus called upon to generate their own resources to ensure full national responsibility for education, including adequate coverage of learners, teachers, curriculum, and infrastructure needs.
After 2015, where the international community and member states adopted a new SDGs agenda, in particular a new education SDG. We all know that if we follow the current trend, we will never achieve, even at the end of the century. So we need to really make a qualitative for the financing. So financing on the two aspects, the domestic financing, so member states have to increase their financing, their budget for education, And at the international level, donors, international agencies have also to increase, and ODA has to increase their aid to developing countries.
In order to make domestic financing for education a reality and no longer a myth, some stakeholders have suggested that governments, civil society organizations, and community-based actors act jointly and develop together strategies aiming at overcoming this challenge.
As civil society, we are calling on our governments to begin with the governments of Africa, that we must take on the role. If we are to take a control of our own African development, then we must mobilize domestic resources. And then the rest of the support will come to help when we have.
We want the share of the size of the budget to grow and the share of education to remain consistently between 4 and 6% of the GDP or 20% of the national budget, focusing on equity, especially marginalized groups, the girls, the disabled, and all those from minority groups, pastoralists, and those with other challenges, so that education reaches to everyone.
We are coming here to ensure that our governments reaffirm their commitment to ensure that there will be increase in education budgetary allocation, and it should be equitably distributed, and it should be managed properly.
Yes, we can. In Africa, yes, if you want, we can. Because if Zimbabwe or Zambia put 5% of its budget revenue on mineral resources, they will have enough money to support education, basic education in Zambia. And I'm sure that if we apply that principle in all those countries, you will see that many domestic resources could be, used to financing education for all.
Senegal, the host country of the Third Financing Conference, a premiere for Africa, has been cited as an example among its peers. Indeed, the Senegalese government, which has allocated more than 25% of its national budget to education, has prioritized education and is working towards literacy for all.
I firmly believe that education should be free for every children. I believe that children have the right to education and that we need them to be educated so that the world can be a better place. No child must be left behind. No child must be prevented from getting education, because once a child is not allowed to go to school, then the question becomes, what will that child become tomorrow? How limited are the child's dream going to be? And I think it's important to take that into consideration. I believe that Africa is the future. I believe that this is where every firm will end up coming. I believe that all headquarters will be coming here because we have the potential to help build the world.
The outcome expected from the Global Partnership for Education Financing Conference includes the implementation of innovative actions to provide every child with equitable access to quality, effective, and inclusive education.